The game that we're building throughout this tutorial series is what's called a tile-based game. Tile-based games are games where the levels are made up of individual blocks, individual tiles that can be repeated multiple times and that together build the actual level. You can see this is what part of the level is going to look like, and these are the tiles that we're using to build that level. So in your project's root folder, you're going to find a folder called images, and in there you'll find tiles.png. Quintus will load this tile set, and each one of the tiles is going to have an index starting from 0. So this is going to be tile 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this lesson, we are going to load our background layer. That's the layer that goes behind all of the action. That layer doesn't influence the rest of the game. It's just for decoration. In this case, that will be the sky, the palm tree, and the cloud. We're also going to add a collision layer. Collision layer will be the ground in this case, and a collision layer, as the name suggests, will collide with the sprites in the game. The sprites will be the individual game elements, such as the player, the enemies. So, for example, if we put a player here, and if this is not a collision layer, then the player, assuming there's gravity, will go all the way down. But if it's a collision layer and it collides with the player, this layer will stop the player from falling all the way down, and it will be the actual ground in your game. How do we define these tiles? So I mentioned that we have the tile sheet, which is the image that contains all of the tiles, and we also need to create JSON files that contain the information of each one of the layers that we want to load. For example, the background layer, I'm going to open it up in Sublime Text. That's the editor I'll be using in this course. You're welcome to use Sublime Text or any code editor that you prefer. If you get stuck with one code editor in particular, I suggest you find one that you find easier to use. So this is what the background looks like in terms of the data for the background. So we said that index starts from 0. So this one's tile 0, 1, 2, 3. 3 corresponds to the sky. As you can see here, this is all sky, and then we have a cloud in here. That's tile number 4. Sorry, this is all the visible area. Below the ground, I've set it to 0. It doesn't matter what I set it to. It's not really gonna get rendered because we have the collision layer on top of the background layer. Let's look at the background layer. We have 0 in all of this part. If you use 0, for here you can see that I haven't put any tile in there. 0 will mean that it's that it doesn't collide with elements. So that's how I've set it up. Then we have the ground, which is number 2. That's where the grass is, and that's tile 2. And beneath we have just dirt, and that would be tile number 1, index 1. Remember, 0, 1. So let's look now at the code. The code that we have now is not going to render this. We're covering that on the very next video. The code that we have now is not going to render anything but a message in our console letting us know when the game assets, by assets I mean images, JSON files, etc., have been successfully loaded into the memory so that they can be displayed. Let's look at HTML, at index.html. We've added a meta tag, a viewport meta tag, which fixes the width device and doesn't allow the user to do zoom in or zoom out. So basically what this does is if you open this in a mobile device, the user is not going to be able to pinch his way in or out to zoom in or out, and also the width of the page is going to be that of the phone. In our body, let me cover this quick. We're including all of the Quintus libraries. This is when you're developing, you include them this way. You include the Quintus first, and then you include all the sub-modules. But when you're in production, you shouldn't do this. You should use the minified version instead, because that's all. The code is compressed. It's minified. It's all packed together without comments. Whereas here you have them. Each one of the files is going to be indentated using a lot of space with a lot of comments, so that you can have a read those files. And I strongly recommend, and I think it's really a requirement, that you go through these files. You don't have to read them all right now, and you don't have to understand everything that's in them right away. But it's important that you go through them and that you familiarize with them, because you can't treat Quintus as a black box. You do have to dig into the engine if you want to make games with Quintus, and that's with any HTML5 game framework, to be honest. Alright, so what's going on here is that we wait for the load event. That means all of our page is loaded into the DOM, into the browser's document. And once that happens, that's when we initiate our Quintus code. And we do that by creating a variable called q, and we can access all these methods by calling q. We're also assigning this to window.q. What does that mean? It basically makes the variable to be globally available here. So if I type q, it exists in the memory and I can use it. We'll cover how to use it later in the course, but you know that by doing this you make it available here, and it's easier to debug your game. You can actually modify properties on your game right from the console just to see what happens, like change a sprite's speed or location and that sort of stuff. Right, so we create Quintus and we're including some of the modules. The first ones we'll be using. We'll include more modules as the course progresses. And we also set up dimensions for our game. So this is where the asset loading takes place. We give as a parameter an array with comma-separated names of our game assets. Quintus already knows where to find these things, so it knows that all the JSON stuff is going to be in the subfolder called data, and the image files are going to be in a subfolder called images. If you dig into the framework files, you'll be able to find how this is implemented and also modified if you want. So once everything is loaded, we are showing a console message saying that everything has been loaded, all the assets of the game are now loaded, and that you're ready to stage a scene, which will be the next step. When after everything is loaded, now you can put a scene into the stage of our game, and that's what's shown to the user, and then we can finally view the loaded level like this.